For 600 years, a book has sat quietly, patiently, mocking every brilliant mind, every determined expert who dared to crack its code. It's a true enigma, a medieval masterpiece that feels utterly alien. The ink is undeniably real, the parchment authenticated as centuries old. Yet the words, oh, those inscrutable words belong to no known tongue, and the pictures, they depict plants that have never, ever graced the earth, alongside cosmic diagrams that defy our understanding of medieval astronomy and bizarre human figures engaged in rituals we can only guess at. No codebreaker, no linguistic genius, not even the most advanced artificial intelligence, nor any university's collective wisdom, has managed to unravel its secrets. It stands as a monument to the unknown, a silent challenge across the centuries. What, and perhaps, more intriguingly, who is the Voynich Manuscript truly hiding within its perplexing pages? Intro today, this baffling volume, officially known as MS-408, resides under bulletproof glass in the hushed, hallowed halls of Yale's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. But its journey to this secure resting place reads less like academic history and more like a thrilling spy novel. Filled with clandestine dealings, secret letters, powerful emperors, shadowy alchemists, and a daring Polish book dealer who risked his entire fortune on what most people dismissed as utter gibberish. The parchment itself tells a story, though not in words. Carbon dating, a marvel of modern science, has pinpointed the origin of the animal skins used for its pages. They were stretched and prepared sometime between 1404 and 1438, placing the manuscript firmly in the early 15th century. Yet, here's where the plot thickens. The first solid record of an owner doesn't surface until 2 centuries later. Think about that for a moment. How do you just lose track of a meticulously crafted, beautifully illustrated book for 200 years? And then, once it finally reappears, how does it continue to baffle every single lab, every cryptographer, every historian, every botanist, and every linguist who touches it, even with all the tools of the 21st century at their disposal? It's a puzzle wrapped in a mystery, tucked inside an enigma. So, stick around, because every answer we think we find only seems to deepen the already profound riddle of the Voynich Manuscript. It's a journey into the heart of an unsolved mystery, and trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. The paper trail that vanishes our modern story of the Voynich Manuscript really begins in 1912, when a passionate and rather eccentric Polish antiquarian named Wilfrid Voynich stumbled upon it. He acquired the codex from a Jesuit college located just outside Rome, a place that, perhaps fittingly, held centuries of forgotten knowledge within its walls. It was a purchase that would define his legacy and haunt the academic world for generations. Tucked inside the manuscript, almost like a forgotten bookmark, was a letter dated 1665. This missive, penned by a Prague physician named Johannes Marcus Marci, made an extraordinary claim. The manuscript had once belonged to none other than Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. Now, Rudolf II wasn't just any emperor. He was a notorious collector of strange and wondrous things, a patron of the arts, sciences, and crucially for our story, the esoteric. His court in Prague was a magnet for alchemists, astrologers, and occultists, all seeking to unlock the secrets of the universe, or at least turn lead into gold. Marci's letter didn't stop there. He also tantalizingly floated the name of Roger Bacon, the brilliant, if controversial, 13th century English friar and polymath. Bacon was a visionary, a thinker far ahead of his time, who famously predicted flying machines and submarines, concepts that must have seemed like pure fantasy in the Middle Ages. The implication was clear. If Bacon had written this, it must contain profound, hidden knowledge. That single, unverified endorsement from Marcy, linking the manuscript to such a legendary figure, was like striking gold for Voynich. It instantly tripled the book's asking price and propelled it into the public imagination, branding it the Bacon Manuscript in sensational newspaper headlines around the world. But here's the problem, and it's a big one. There's no bill of sale, no imperial seal, no library stamp, no definitive historical record whatsoever that ties this mysterious volume directly to Rudolf II. It's a gaping hole in its provenance, and the Roger Bacon connection even more tenuous. The carbon dating unequivocally places the manuscript's creation in the early 15th century, a full century after Bacon's death. So, either Marcy's letter was completely mistaken, perhaps a well-intentioned but ultimately false attribution meant to boost the book's value or intrigue, or the book is somehow older than its own origin story, which, of course, makes no sense. The historical record, or lack thereof, is stubbornly uncooperative. After Wilfrid Voynich's death in 1930, the Codex embarked on a more conventional, though still somewhat quiet, journey. It passed first to his wife, then to a dealer who understood its unique, unsettling allure, and eventually to a philanthropist who eventually donated it to Yale University in 1969. In total, only 4 documented owners in 3 centuries. That's incredibly unusual for a medieval text. Most manuscripts from that era cycled through dozens of hands, libraries, and private collections. Why did this one sit largely untouched, unread, and undiscussed for such vast stretches of time? It's almost as if it was waiting for the right moment, or perhaps simply resisting discovery. The paper trail, so clear in other historical documents, simply vanishes in the 1600s, only to mysteriously reboot with Wilfrid Voynich in 1912. This 2-century vacuum, this vast unknown gap in its history, is precisely what makes the manuscript so fertile ground for speculation. It's a void that theories, both wild and academic, absolutely love to fill, each one trying to bridge the chasm of its lost past. Was it hidden away, forgotten? Or was its true history deliberately obscured? We simply don't know, and that not knowing is a powerful magnet for our collective curiosity. A tour through impossible pages now. Let's actually open the manuscript and take a tour through its impossible pages. The moment you do, the world of conventional botany completely falls apart. Page after page unfurls a vibrant, yet utterly perplexing, botanical garden unlike anything found in nature. You'll encounter sprawling blue-green vines that twist and turn with an almost alien grace. Multi-headed sunflowers that seem to gaze in every direction at once, and fruits shaped less like anything edible and more like bizarre, pulsating jellyfish. This is a stark contrast to the herbal manuals of the 1400s. Those were intensely practical books, lifelines for medieval apothecaries and physicians. A doctor needed to be able to accurately identify real plants in the wild, to harvest them for medicines, to understand their properties, and to treat ailments. Clarity and precision were paramount. But the Voynich drawings, they look like something plucked from a fever dream. A fantastical dream botany that's half plant, half geometric exercise, utterly defying any attempt at classification by modern botanists. Are they allegorical, symbolic, or simply the product of an incredibly imaginative, perhaps even deranged, mind? We're left guessing. Flip ahead, and you're plunged into the astronomical choir. Here, you'll find intricate depictions of suns, moons, and the familiar cluster of the Pleiades, repeated across 38 medallions. These aren't crude sketches. They're detailed, often elegant, celestial charts. But, once again, the enigma deepens. While we might recognize some cosmic patterns, the constellations themselves are labeled not in Latin, the universal language of medieval scholarship, but in that same maddening, mysterious script. What celestial events were they tracking? What astrological significance did they hold? If these were truly star charts, they're unlike any other known from the period, suggesting either a unique, lost astronomical tradition or something far stranger. The next section, often referred to as the biological or balneological section, is perhaps the most visually stunning and, frankly, unsettling. It consistently stuns even the most seasoned curators and scholars. Here, you find page after page of naked women, often with noticeably swollen bellies, standing waist-deep in pools of green liquid. These women are connected by an elaborate network of painted pipes and tubes that loop and intertwine like an intricate plumbing schematic, or perhaps a circulatory system. Are these midwife notes, detailing anatomical processes or birthing rituals? Are they complex alchemical metaphors, symbolizing purification or transformation? Could they be a lost allegory about bodily fluids and humors, crucial concepts in medieval medicine, or perhaps a visual narrative of some secret society's initiation rites? The interpretations are as varied as they are speculative, each one offering a tantalizing glimpse into a world we can't quite grasp. A final chapter, often called the pharmaceutical section, displays tiny jars, roots, and what might be recipe paragraphs, hinting at practical applications, perhaps for medicine or alchemy. Yet, even here, the text refuses to conform. It runs not just left or right, as we expect, but also right or left, and even spirals inward on some pages, like a dizzying vortex of meaning. Medieval readers, accustomed to highly structured, logical texts, expected clarity, order, and a straightforward presentation of knowledge. This unknown artist, or scribe, clearly had other intentions. They expected, it seems, not clarity, but obsession. They demanded a level of engagement, a deep dive into the unknown, that few other manuscripts from their era would ever dare to ask. It's a deliberate act of obfuscation, or perhaps a unique form of artistic and intellectual expression designed to challenge, rather than inform, its reader. The alphabet that shouldn't exist now. Let's talk about the very essence of the manuscript's mystery. The script itself, if you meticulously count the distinct characters used throughout the Voynich Manuscript, you'll arrive at a number somewhere around 40. This is a significant detail, because it's far more characters than most conventional medieval alphabets, like the Latin alphabet, which typically has around 26 letters. This unusual number immediately signals that we're not dealing with a simple substitution cipher where each Voynich character stands for a Latin letter. It's something far more complex, or entirely different. What's also striking to linguists are the consistent patterns within the text. Word lengths, for instance, tend to cluster tightly around 5 or 6 letters, and certain sequences of characters, or repeating patterns, appear with remarkable regularity every few lines. It's not random, it's structured. This internal consistency is actually one of the strongest arguments against the idea that the manuscript is just meaningless gibberish. If someone were just drawing random squiggles, you wouldn't expect to see such statistical regularities. Linguists, ever keen to apply scientific methods, have even run Zipf's law on the corpus of the Voynich text. For those unfamiliar, Zipf's law is an empirical law relating to the frequency distribution of words in natural language. Essentially, it states that, in any sufficiently large body of natural language utterances, The frequency of any word is inversely proportional to its rank in the frequency table. So, the most frequent word will occur approximately twice as often as the second most frequent word, 3 times as often as the third most frequent, and so on. The astonishing finding. The slope of the Voynich Manuscript's word frequency distribution matches that of natural languages, not random babble. This is a critical piece of evidence that suggests very strongly that the text behaves like a real language, even if we can't understand it. It has a statistical heartbeat. In a more recent high-profile attempt to crack the code, in 2020, Canada's University of Alberta trained an artificial intelligence algorithm on a vast dataset of 380 world languages. The hope was that the AI, free from human preconceptions, might spot patterns we've missed. The algorithm's initial, tantalizing output tagged the Voynich script as encoded Hebrew, with a confidence level of 60%. This sent ripples of excitement through the Voynich community. Just days later, German Egyptologist Rainer Hannig, building on this AI-generated lead, produced a Hebrew-flavored translation of the manuscript's very first line. It seemed, for a fleeting moment, that the 6-century-old mystery might finally be unraveling. However, critics were quick to shoot back, arguing that Hannig's translation involved cherry-picked vowels, forcing the Hebrew interpretation rather than letting it emerge naturally from the text. The excitement, sadly, was short-lived, and the encoded Hebrew theory remains highly controversial and unproven. Perhaps the most respected attempt at decipherment came from the legendary World War II codebreaker, William Friedman. This was the man who, along with his team, famously broke Japan's purple cipher, a feat of cryptographic genius. Friedman dedicated over 30 years of his life to the Voynich, meticulously analyzing its patterns, word by word, character by character. His painstaking efforts culminated in a foot-high stack of notes. But ultimately, his conclusion was both profound and frustrating. This is no simple substitution cipher. Friedman's immense expertise indicated that if it is a cipher, it's one of unprecedented complexity, multi-layered and incredibly sophisticated, perhaps even employing polyalphabetic or homophonic substitution, or something even more devious. If it's a language, it's an isolated one, seemingly unrelated to any known linguistic family, a linguistic orphan. And if it's a hoax, well, then it's arguably the most elaborate, statistically consistent, and mind-bogglingly successful prank in human history, requiring a level of foresight and sustained effort that beggars belief. The alphabet that shouldn't exist continues to defy every attempt to bring it into the light. The hoax hypothesis. So, with all this baffling complexity, one of the most persistent and, for some, most appealing theories is that the Voynich manuscript is simply an elaborate hoax. Could a cunning 15th-century charlatan, perhaps a clever con artist with a flair for the dramatic, have scored a hefty sum of cash from a gullible emperor like Rudolf II? The argument, at first glance, seems tidy and plausible. Imagine the scenario. You hire a skilled scribe, someone capable of creating beautiful, if meaningless, script and intriguing illustrations. You invent a pretty, yet utterly nonsensical, gibberish language. You then peddle this meticulously crafted fraught as ancient wisdom, a lost tome of powerful secrets, perhaps even claiming it was from a legendary figure like Roger Bacon. Then, you simply walk away with your ill-gotten gains before anyone has a chance to ask too many inconvenient questions. It's an attractive narrative, perfectly fitting for a cynical age. But, as with most things, Voynich, the tidy explanation quickly unravels under closer scrutiny, hitting several very significant problems. Problem 1. Vellum was incredibly precious. We're not talking about cheap paper here. The Voynich Manuscript consists of 234 pages, or 102 folios, made from calfskin parchment. To produce that much high-quality vellum in the 15th century would have required the skins of dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of young calves or goats. This wasn't a trivial expense. It was an enormous investment. In fact, for the price of 200 blank pages of vellum, you could have bought a small farm, a substantial piece of land, or even a small house in many parts of medieval Europe. A forger would have had to commit a truly staggering amount of capital and resources up front, just for the raw materials, without any guarantee of a payoff. That's a huge gamble for a mere prank. Problem 2. Consistency. This is where the hoax theory really starts to falter under the weight of scientific evidence. As we discussed, every statistical test, from Zipf's law to more complex analyses of character and word frequency, finds that the Voynich text obeys linguistic rules. The word frequency, the distribution of characters, the internal grammar-like structures, they are all remarkably consistent across all sections of the manuscript. This isn't random doodling or a simple, repetitive substitution. To create such a statistically consistent, yet meaningless, text would have required a forger of almost superhuman genius. They would have needed to meticulously plan an entire pseudo-linguistic system in advance, and then maintain that intricate consistency for months, if not years, of painstaking scribbling and illustration. Imagine the mental gymnastics required to keep such an elaborate, fake system perfectly coherent over hundreds of pages. It feels almost more difficult than inventing a real language. Problem 3. Motive. While the idea of scamming an emperor sounds appealing, Rudolf II was no fool, at least not where his prized possessions were concerned. He already employed some of the finest astronomers, alchemists, and scholars of his day. He paid good money for genuine star charts, for alchemical treatises, and for books he could read and understand. Why would he, or anyone, pay a king's ransom for a book that was utterly incomprehensible? What utility would it have? What secret knowledge could it possibly convey if no one could decipher it? While he was fascinated by the esoteric, he was also a patron of genuine inquiry. The idea that he would knowingly be duped by an expensive, unreadable book seems out of character for such a discerning, if idiosyncratic, collector. The hoax theory survives, largely because it offers a neat, almost satisfyingly cynical explanation for an otherwise intractable mystery. It's tidy. But history, especially medieval history, rarely is. Tidy explanations, unfortunately, rarely survive the messy realities of medieval bookkeeping, which often meticulously recorded expenditures, purchases, and intellectual exchanges. The lack of any record, any mention of such an expensive and unusual hoax, in the extensive archives of Rudolf II or his contemporaries, casts a long shadow of doubt on this otherwise appealingly simple solution. Lost language or secret society? What if the answer isn't some elaborate cipher or a cunning hoax, but something far simpler, yet equally profound? Perhaps the text is just plain speech, written in a language that, tragically, simply died out. Think about it. The 15th century, when the Voynich was created, was a turbulent time in Europe. It was an era of immense social upheaval, devastating plagues, and constant migration. Trade pigeons, local migrant dialects, and liturgical tongues, often spoken by small, isolated communities, frequently vanished without a trace, leaving no written records or only fleeting fragments. The Black Death, in particular, wiped out entire populations, and with them, countless oral traditions and unique linguistic variants. It's entirely plausible that a small, insular community, perhaps one with specific knowledge or practices, might have created this book in their own, now extinct, language. This theory gains a particularly compelling dimension when we consider the idea of a community of women healers or midwives. In medieval Europe, women often possessed vast knowledge of herbal remedies and practical medicine, passed down through generations. However, they were frequently marginalized and forbidden from formal education, especially from writing in Latin, the language of the church and academia. What if these women, needing to record their vital knowledge, created their own system? They could have phonetically recorded their own spoken language, their plain speech, perhaps in a script designed to be understood only by their own circle. The bizarre women in baths drawings, so puzzling in other contexts, then take on a new meaning. They could be teaching tools for midwives, visual aids for anatomical understanding, or symbolic representations of healing rituals, carefully encoded so that the ever-watchful church authorities couldn't accuse them of heresy or witchcraft. To be caught with texts detailing non-sanctioned medical practices or beliefs could have had dire consequences. This idea gained significant traction in 2021 when British linguist Claire Hardacre presented research suggesting a fascinating connection. She meticulously matched some of the plant labels within the manuscript to Romani numerals, a system used by the Romani people. This was a groundbreaking potential link, hinting at a specific, marginalized community as the authors. The Romani, an itinerant people, often communicated in their own distinct languages and dialects, and their presence across Europe during the 15th century is well documented. Could this be a clue to the linguistic family, or at least a cultural influence, behind the voice? However, even this compelling theory faces its own formidable hurdles. The vocabulary count of the Voynich Manuscript is estimated to be close to 8,000 unique words. To put that in perspective, that's roughly twice the vocabulary of the King James Bible, a monumental work of literature. 8,000 unique words is an awfully large lexicon for what would presumably be a small, isolated village dialect or the specialized language of a small group of healers. Most small dialects or technical jargons tend to have a much smaller, more focused vocabulary. This vastness of vocabulary suggests a language with a richness and complexity that seems to contradict the idea of a narrowly focused, rapidly forgotten tongue. And what about the secret society angle? Secret societies have always loved coded charters, hidden messages, and esoteric symbols. It's part of their mystique and their method of safeguarding their knowledge. But again, a disconnect emerges. Why would such a society illustrate their deeply guarded secrets with plants that never grew on Earth? Wouldn't a secret society, especially one dealing with practical knowledge or hidden rituals, use symbols and illustrations that, while perhaps obscure, still had a basis in reality, or at least a consistent internal logic? The fantastical nature of the illustrations seems to clash with the practical need for secrecy and instruction, leaving us once again in a labyrinth of unanswered questions. Alchemy, aliens, and everything between. Let's dive headfirst into some of the more esoteric and, frankly, wilder theories that have swirled around the Voynich Manuscript for centuries. One of the most enduring and historically contextualized is the idea that it's an alchemical text. 17th-century alchemists, those fascinating blend of scientists, philosophers, and mystics, believed that true transformation, whether of base metals into gold, or of the human soul, required both precise recipe and intricate ritual. The enigmatic green baths, where the naked women are depicted, could be interpreted as symbolic mercurial baptisms, stages of purification in the alchemical process. The detailed star charts, far from being mere astronomical observations, might represent precise timing for astrological distillation, where planetary alignments were believed to be crucial for successful alchemical operations. Prague, during Rudolf II's reign, was essentially alchemical Hollywood. It was a buzzing hub for practitioners of the Hermetic arts, a place where the lines between science and magic were beautifully blurred. Figures like Edward Kelly and John Dee, two of the most prominent and controversial alchemists and occultists of their time, famously lingered at Rudolf's court. They promised the emperor nothing less than the ability to turn copper into gold, to commune with angels, and to unlock the deepest secrets of the universe. Could Kelly, a man infamous for claiming to speak in angelic tongues, a complex, invented language he called Enochian, have invented an entire language for a private grimoire, a magical textbook specifically for Rudolf II? It's a tantalizing thought. Supporters of this theory point to a curious piece of evidence. Handwriting samples of Edward Kelly. They note a distinctive, curved gallows shape in some of his known writings that bears a striking resemblance to certain characters, particularly those with ascenders and descenders, in the Voynich Manuscript. It's a subtle but intriguing visual echo. However, skeptics are quick to counter this. They argue that Kelly, a man constantly embroiled in controversy, legal troubles, and the notoriously difficult work of faking transmutation, would have been far too busy with his elaborate charades to painstakingly pen 230 pages of fluent, albeit nonsensical, text and intricate illustrations. His life was one of constant performance and desperate maneuvers to maintain his standing and his patrons' belief. Would he really have dedicated years to such a monumental, secret project? It seems unlikely. And then, inevitably, when we're chasing the fringes of possibility, someone always shouts aliens. The idea that the Voynich Manuscript is extraterrestrial in origin, a message from beyond the stars, a lost alien artifact, occasionally surfaces. It's an exciting thought, certainly. But the problem, as always, comes back to the hard science. The carbon dating is definitively solar, not stellar. It tells us, with high confidence, that the vellum was made from earthly animals, on Earth, in the early 15th century. There's no scientific evidence whatsoever to suggest an extraterrestrial origin. Other fringe theories propose time travelers, ancient Atlanteans, or even a book that literally writes itself. While these ideas are certainly imaginative, they lack any credible evidence and remain firmly in the realm of speculative fiction rather than serious academic inquiry. The Voynich Manuscript, for all its mystery, remains firmly rooted in medieval Europe, even if its contents seem to defy that reality. What labs have proved, despite the swirling vortex of theories, speculation, and outright fantasy surrounding the Voynich Manuscript, there are some undeniable facts. These facts aren't about what the book says, but rather what the book is. And for these facts, we turn to the rigorous, methodical work of modern science. In 2011, the Beinecke Library, recognizing the immense scholarly interest and the need for definitive answers about the manuscript's physical properties, granted researchers permission to take tiny, almost microscopic, samples from 4 different folios. These samples were then subjected to radiocarbon dating, a highly precise method for determining the age of organic materials. The results were conclusive and remarkably consistent. The vellum was produced between 1404 and 1438. This wasn't a guess. It was a scientific determination with a 1 sigma confidence level, meaning there's a 68% probability that the true date falls within that range, and an even higher probability that it falls within a slightly broader range. This definitively places the manuscript's creation in the early 15th century, firmly within the late medieval period. It shatters any theories of it being a much older, ancient text. or a much more recent forgery from the 16th or 17th century. Further scientific inquiry continued in 2020 with DNA swabs taken from the parchment. These tests were designed to identify the animal species from which the vellum was made. The results indicated the presence of sheep and goat mitochondria. More specifically, the mitochondrial DNA sequences were consistent with genetic profiles found in mid-European herds, strongly pointing to a geographical origin for the vellum in either southern Germany or northern Italy. This gives us a much clearer picture of where the raw materials for the manuscript likely came from, narrowing down the potential region of its creation. Multispectral imaging, a technique that uses different wavelengths of light from ultraviolet to infrared to reveal details invisible to the naked eye, has also been employed. This advanced imaging process brought to light faint, almost imperceptible page numbers. These numbers weren't uniformly applied. Their inconsistencies and overlaps suggested something crucial: that the chapters of the manuscript were likely reordered after its initial binding. This implies a complex creation process, perhaps an initial draft that was later reorganized, or even a deliberate attempt to obscure the original sequence. It tells us something about the hands that handled it, and the potential evolution of its structure. And finally, X-ray fluorescence, XRF spectroscopy, was used to analyze the composition of the inks. XRF bombards a material with X-rays and measures the fluorescent X-rays emitted in response, providing a chemical fingerprint. The analysis revealed that the manuscript was written with iron gall ink, a standard writing ink used throughout Europe from the Middle Ages into the 19th century. Crucially, the XRF also detected traces of copper, which was a common additive to iron gall ink in the 15th century, often used to intensify the blackness or provide a different hue. This recipe for ink was widely used in medieval monasteries and scriptoria, further cementing its authenticity as a product of its time and place. In essence, all the science, the carbon dating, the DNA analysis, the multispectral imaging, the XRF converges on one undeniable conclusion: the Voynich Manuscript is an authentic, medieval European craft. It is not a modern forgery. It is not an alien artifact. It is a genuine product of the early 15th century, likely from a region in Central Europe. The science has confirmed the when and the where with remarkable precision. But, and here's the kicker, despite all these incredible technological advancements, none of it, not a single bit, has managed to explain the what. The content, the meaning, the language, that remains as elusive as ever. The physical object has been demystified, but its intellectual core remains stubbornly intact. Why we keep staring so? After all the scientific analysis, all the linguistic theories, all the historical detective work, why do we keep staring at this book? Why does it continue to captivate us, drawing in new generations of enthusiasts and experts alike? The answer, I think, lies deep within our very nature. Humans are, at our core, pattern engines. Give us noise, a seemingly random collection of data, and our brains are hardwired to find order, to construct meaning, to discern symphonies where others might only hear static. The Voynich Manuscript, in its brilliant and frustrating design, offers just enough structure to keep that engine running, to keep us perpetually engaged in the hunt. It presents us with tantalizing clues, repeating word roots, suggesting a consistent vocabulary. Illustrations that, while bizarre, are clearly aligned with specific sections of text, implying a relationship, and sequential page numbers, indicating a deliberate, if now jumbled, order. These aren't random scribbles, they are carefully constructed elements that whisper promises of meaning, inviting us to lean in closer, to try just one more time. This is why the Voynich isn't just an academic curiosity. It's a deep, communal rabbit hole. You can spend one afternoon online, reading about it, and before you know it, you're scribbling substitution grids on napkins, convinced you're on the verge of a breakthrough. 2 weeks later, you might find yourself fluent in the esoteric debates raging in Voynich YouTube comments sections, arguing passionately about the merits of one linguistic theory over another. The puzzle becomes a shared obsession, a crowdsourced cliffhanger that refreshes its urgency every time a new paper drops, a new AI algorithm is tested, or a new historical tidbit is unearthed. It's a challenge that unites codebreakers, linguists, historians, botanists, and armchair detectives from around the globe in a common quest. Perhaps, then, the true legacy of the Voynich Manuscript isn't about the answer it holds, but rather the chase it ignites. It's about the relentless curiosity it sparks in anyone brave enough to flip open a single scanned page. It reminds us of the thrill of the unknown, the joy of intellectual pursuit, and the enduring human desire to solve the most perplexing riddles. It's a testament to the power of a mystery to inspire, to connect, and to endlessly challenge our assumptions. All right, after that deep dive into the Voynich's many secrets, I'm curious. What's your take? Is it an elaborate hoax, a lost language from a forgotten culture, or something even weirder, something we haven't even conceived of yet? Drop your gut reaction and any theories you've been pondering in the comments below. And if you've been inspired to stitch together your own translation, or even just a compelling piece of evidence, share the link. The best community theories and insights might just get featured in a follow-up video. The enduring enigma. So, here we are, centuries later, still captivated, until the day a true Rosetta Stone surfaces, a bilingual inscription, perhaps a clear cipher key, or an unimaginable descendant who somehow speaks the forgotten tongue. The Voynich Manuscript will undoubtedly keep its title as history's most stubborn, most compelling, and most beautiful mystery. It has already outlived every confident skeptic, every self-assured decoder, and every generation of experts who thought they had finally cracked its code. It laughs softly from its bulletproof case, its secrets intact. Remarkably, the parchment itself is still supple enough to turn gently under the gloved hands of conservators, a testament to the enduring craftsmanship of its anonymous creators. This physical resilience mirrors its intellectual tenacity. Perhaps, and this is a thought worth pondering, the book isn't actually hiding knowledge in the traditional sense. Perhaps it's not meant to be read, but rather to be experienced, to be felt. Perhaps it's reminding us, in its silent, beautiful way, just how much curiosity we still possess, how much wonder we've yet to spend, and how much we still don't know about our own history and the minds that shaped it. One thing feels absolutely certain: the moment we finally crack it, the magic, the allure, the tantalizing mystery will inevitably dim. The enigma will become a solved problem, a footnote in a history book. Until then, the pages stay open, the questions stay fresh, and the enigma endures, a constant, beautiful challenge to human ingenuity and intellectual humility. It's a book that doesn't just hold secrets. It is a secret, and perhaps that's its most profound message of all. Thanks for decoding this deep dive into the perplexing world of the Voynich Manuscript with me. If you enjoyed the ride through history's most enduring mystery, don't forget to tap that subscribe button and check out our playlist on history's strangest texts. Who knows? The next story might finally deliver an answer, or leave us just as wonderfully baffled as the Voynich itself.